There is a specific, involuntary tightening of the solar plexus that occurs the moment you enter a space governed by unpredictability. While others around you seem to physically soften, their voices pitching up into uninhibited coos of delight, your nervous system initiates a silent, rapid withdrawal protocol. It is not a conscious decision to reject the immediate environment. It is a somatic reflex, instantaneous and rigid. You find yourself tracking movement in your peripheral vision, hyper-aware of a living presence that operates entirely outside the rules of human logic, verbal boundaries, or social consent. The discomfort often begins at the skin level. It is the visceral anticipation of a texture you did not ask for. The dampness, the shedding, the coarse intrusion into your personal radius. Every muscle in your body engages in a subtle bracing action, a preparation to defend against a touch that is universally framed as affection, but feels, to you, like a violation of hygiene and structural order. You watch the chaotic energy unfold, the sudden jumps, the erratic noises, the unmasked biological drives, and you do not feel the warmth that the world insists you must feel. You feel a rapid depletion of battery. Your brain attempts to calculate the trajectory of this chaotic element, but because it follows no intelligible social contract, the calculation continuously fails. This leaves you in a state of suspended vigilance. You are not relaxing, you are enduring. You are managing a low-grade threat response that demands you sanitize your hands, inspect your clothes, and maintain a calculated barrier between your body and the source of the entropy. But this rigidness isn't actually about the creature itself. Society has implicitly agreed upon a single, universal litmus test for basic human decency: the immediate, instinctive reaction to a dependent creature. In the collective narrative, the ability to bond with a non-human entity is the primary signal of empathy. It is viewed as the rawest evidence of a soul. Therefore, when you fail to produce the required neurochemical display of adoration, when you stiffen instead of melt, or recoil instead of reach out, you are not viewed merely as someone with a different preference. You are viewed as someone with a fundamental hardware defect. The silence that follows your non-reaction is heavy with diagnosis. You see it in the eyes of peers and partners, a sudden, sharp recalibration of their trust in you. The labels attach themselves almost instantly. You are categorized as cold, sterile, or suspiciously over-controlled. Cultural shorthand suggests that a lack of affection for animals correlates with a lack of capacity for human love, treating your sensory boundary as a moral failing. The phrase, "I don't trust people who don't like dogs," is often spoken in your presence not as an opinion, but as an absolute, objective law of nature. This external pressure forces you into a corner of quiet performance. To avoid the stigma of being labeled a red flag, you learn to override your own nervous system's retreat signal. You feign a smile when a wet nose touches your hand. You simulate tolerance while your internal alarms are screaming for distance. You permit the invasion of your space to maintain your social standing. But this act of masking, suppressing a genuine recoil response to appease the sentimental projections of others, is not a neutral social lubricant. It is a transaction where you purchase acceptance by selling your own comfort, and the price of that ticket is accumulating in a ledger you haven't dared to open. This erosion is not dramatic. It does not manifest as a sudden panic attack or a public outburst, which effectively masks the severity of the depletion occurring beneath the surface. Instead, the cost accumulates in the microtransactions of your daily attention span. You find yourself engaging in a form of cognitive cartography whenever you leave your controlled environment, silently mapping out safe zones where the variables of biological chaos are minimized. A casual invitation to a friend's home becomes a complex risk assessment. Will there be barking? Will there be shedding on the upholstery? Will you be forced to eat food prepared in a kitchen where a cat walks on the counters? This constant background calculation acts as a parasitic drain on your executive function. While others are passively enjoying the atmosphere, your brain is locked in a loop of threat detection and hygiene maintenance. You are hyper-aware of the texture of the air, the faint, acrid scent of dander that signals a compromised sanitary perimeter. Every time you sit down, you perform a subtle, involuntary scan of the surface, checking for hair or residue. This is not fussiness. It is a neurological imperative to maintain a boundary between your body and an environment you perceive as fundamentally unclean. Consider the metabolic cost of overriding the disgust mechanism for hours at a time. Disgust is evolution's most primal behavioral immune system. Its function is to repel contaminants and potential pathogens to preserve the organism's integrity. When you are forced to suppress this reflex, to smile while a dog licks your hand, or to sit calmly while a cat rubs against your leg, you are fighting your own biological hardware. You are spending limited neural energy to inhibit a survival signal that is screaming that the environment is unsafe or unsanitary. Over months and years, this suppression manifests as a specific type of social fatigue. You leave these interactions feeling disproportionately drained, not because the conversation was difficult, but because you have been physically bracing yourself against an intrusion the entire time. You begin to withdraw, not out of misanthropy, but out of a desperate need to return to a space where your sensory inputs are predictable, sterile, and governed by logic rather than instinct. You are defending a perimeter that no one else can see, and the strictness of that defense suggests that the threat is not actually about the animal at all. To understand this resistance, we must strip away the cultural morality of animal loving and examine the architecture of the predictive brain. Your nervous system functions primarily as a prediction machine. Its goal is to reduce uncertainty by creating stable models of your environment. When you enter a room, your brain instantly maps the layout, the social hierarchy, and the potential threats, seeking a state of cognitive closure where it can relax its vigilance. Animals, by their very nature, are engines of biological entropy. They introduce a variable of high-frequency unpredictability into the environment. For a nervous system that prioritizes order and hygiene as proxies for safety, an animal represents a prediction error that never resolves. This is not a personality quirk. It is likely a hyperactivation of the behavioral immune system. This is an evolved psychological mechanism designed to detect and avoid pathogen vectors. In most people, the social reward of bonding with an animal overrides this system. In your brain, the override fails. When a dog jumps or a cat sheds, your anterior insula, the region of the brain responsible for processing disgust and visceral awareness, does not register play. It registers contamination. You are likely experiencing a phenomenon known as sensory gating failure. A typical brain can filter out the background noise of a panting dog or the subtle smell of fur, pushing it into the subconscious so the person can focus on the conversation. Your brain, however, lacks this filter for specific biological stimuli. It processes the animal's presence as a foreground threat, granting it the same attentional weight as a fire alarm. The animal's movements are not background ambience. They are active disruptions to your homeostasis. This explains the rigid posture and the withdrawal. You are not hating the animal. You are attempting to manually regulate an environment that has become sensorily hostile. Your prefrontal cortex is exhausted from trying to suppress the amygdala's fear response and the insula's disgust response simultaneously. You are effectively performing high-level cognitive suppression just to sit on a couch. But if this mechanism is simply about hygiene and unpredictability, it should apply to all messy aspects of life. Yet, you likely tolerate the chaos of a busy city street or a cluttered desk without this visceral recoil. Why does this specific biological variable trigger a shutdown that other forms of disorder do not? This is not a failure of the heart. It is a conflict of the senses. You have spent years silently accepting the diagnosis that you are emotionally deficient, believing that your inability to bond with a species across the biological divide signifies a missing component in your humanity. But this is a category error. You are confusing a specific sensory preference with a moral orientation. The rejection you feel is not malice. It is a rigid adherence to structural boundaries. Your system is architected to value autonomy, cleanliness, and predictable social contracts above the vague warmth of dependency. When an animal breaches those contracts, by jumping, smelling, or demanding attention without verbal negotiation, your system does not register a friend. It registers a breach. You are not cold for failing to react with warmth. You are simply a closed system in a world that insists on open borders. You are not a person who hates animals. You are a person who requires a sterile environment to process intimacy. You require consent before touch. You require logic before connection. The animal offers neither. Therefore, your reaction is not an absence of love, but the presence of a non-negotiable standard for how you engage with living things. You have effectively curated a life of high control to mitigate the threat of biological entropy. But this curation is not free. By defining yourself through what you exclude, the dirt, the noise, the need, you inadvertently define yourself by your rigidity. You are safe from the invasion, but you are also trapped in the sentry box, forever scanning the horizon for a threat that the rest of the species has somehow learned to embrace. The fortress is secure, but the air inside is becoming stale. If we zoom out from the specific trigger of the animal, we begin to see that this intolerance for biological entropy is not an isolated quirk. It is the dominant architectural feature of your entire existence. The animal is merely the most obvious violation of a rule you apply, subconsciously, to every square inch of your life. The rule of frictionless order. Look at your living environment. Your space is likely curated not just for aesthetics, but for a specific lack of visual noise. You do not just prefer cleanliness, you require it for cognitive function. Clutter is not just messy to you, it is a static signal that degrades your ability to think. You likely organize your possessions with a rigidity that others find impressive, but slightly unnerving. Everything has a home, not because you are a perfectionist, but because knowing exactly where an object sits reduces the computational load on your brain. You are engineering a habitat where variables are eliminated. You are creating a zero-surprise ecosystem. Now apply this filter to your social circle. The people you allow closest to you likely share a specific trait. They are low-entropy humans. You probably struggle with friends who are erratic, emotionally volatile, or messy in their life choices. Just as you recoil from the unpredictable movements of a dog, you recoil from the unpredictable emotional spikes of a dramatic partner. You prefer relationships that operate on verbal contracts and clear logic. You want intimacy that can be scheduled, discussed, and analyzed, rather than intimacy that erupts spontaneously or demands you to wade through ambiguous emotional swamps. You are filtering out human animals, people who operate on instinct and impulse rather than cortex and code. This pattern of threat detection extends into the sensory texture of your daily routine. Consider your relationship with food, or touch, or travel. You likely have a profound distaste for sticky sensations, for residue left on your hands, for public surfaces that retain the heat of a stranger's body. You might find yourself washing your hands not just to clean them, but to reset your sensory baseline. This is the behavioral immune system operating in overdrive. It is treating the unpredictable texture of the world as a contaminant. You are not just avoiding germs, you are avoiding the feeling of having the world stick to you without your permission. In your professional life, this often manifests as a relentless drive for autonomy. You gravitate toward roles where you control the workflow, the environment, and the output. You likely detest open-plan offices, essentially human zoos where auditory and olfactory boundaries are constantly breached. You thrive in remote work or specialized individualism, environments where you can construct a hermetically sealed bubble of productivity. You tell yourself this is because you are efficient, and you are. But you are efficient because you have eliminated the friction of dealing with other living organisms. You have built a life that functions like a clean room in a microprocessor factory. Dust is eliminated. Variables are controlled. The temperature is regulated. In this environment, you function at an incredibly high level. You are sharp, reliable, and composed. But notice what is happening to the scope of your world. To maintain this level of control, the perimeter of your safe zone must shrink. First, you eliminate the pets. Then, you eliminate the friends who have pets. Then, you eliminate the friends who are too chaotic. Then, you avoid the travel destinations that are too dirty or unpredictable. You stop going to the events where you can't control the seating. You stop eating the foods that require using your hands. You are applying the same disgust mechanism that rejects the dog to an ever-widening circle of human experiences. You are optimizing your life for safety and predictability, effectively acting as the sterile editor of your own reality. You delete the scenes that don't fit the narrative of control. But here is the contradiction you are beginning to feel. The more successful you are at eliminating these biological stressors, the less resilient you become to them. By removing the microdoses of chaos from your daily life, you have lost your tolerance for the basic friction of existence. A minor disruption, a loud noise, a bad smell, a sudden change in plans, now feels like a catastrophic system failure. You have engineered a life so perfectly smooth that you have no traction left to handle the rough terrain of reality. The mechanism that was supposed to protect your peace is now actively shrinking your world, turning your preference for order into a claustrophobic imperative. You aren't just managing your environment anymore, you are hiding from the organic nature of life itself. There is a specific, invisible tax levied on a life dedicated to the absolute removal of friction. By successfully editing out the biological variables that cause you distress, the erratic animals, the intrusive textures, the unpredictable humans, you achieve the homeostasis you crave. You reach a state of zero disturbance. But in the laws of thermodynamics, a closed system with zero exchange of energy eventually succumbs to stagnation. You have purchased your autonomy, but the currency you paid with was your own adaptability. This is the central paradox of your survival strategy. The more you protect yourself from the mess of living things, the more fragile you become to the very idea of life. This is known as sensitization. By avoiding the exposure to the chaotic stimuli of animals and messy humans, your brain does not habituate to them. Instead, it marks them as increasingly dangerous. The neural groove of disgust deepens with every act of avoidance. What started as a mild annoyance at a dog's barking 5 years ago has likely calcified into an immediate, rage-inducing sensory assault today. You are not mastering your environment. You are becoming allergic to it. Furthermore, this rigid curation creates a sterile glass wall between you and the potential for deep connection. Intimacy, by definition, is a biological collision. It is messy, fluid, and often unhygienic. It requires a suspension of the very boundaries you guard so jealously. When you signal to the world that you cannot tolerate the benign chaos of a pet, you are also subconsciously signaling a limited capacity for the chaotic vulnerability of human love. You project an aura of untouchability. While this successfully repels the things that annoy you, it also repels the serendipity, the warmth, and the messy, unscripted moments of joy that only occur when defenses are lowered. You have effectively placed yourself in a state of emotional quarantine. You are safe from the dander, the noise, and the intrusion. Your clothes are clean. Your schedule is perfectly adhered to. But you may notice a creeping sense of numbness, a distinct lack of resonance with the world around you. You have prioritized the safety of the container over the contents of the life within it. You are preserved, perfectly intact, like a specimen behind glass, untouched, unbothered, and entirely alone. The silence in your life is no longer a source of peace. It is becoming a heavy, resonant frequency of its own. You sit in your curated space, and the silence is absolute. There is no scramble of claws on the floorboards, no sudden, demanding weight pressing against your thigh. The air is filtered, neutral, and devoid of the musk that signals another living presence. You have successfully engineered the environment your nervous system demanded. The variables are zero, the threat is neutralized. But in this perfect stillness, a specific heaviness begins to settle. It is not regret. Regret implies a mistake, and your logic was sound, but rather a stark awareness of the vacuum you have created. You must consider if this clarity is actually peace, or if it is simply the absence of sensory data. When you look at the empty spot on the rug, where a chaotic element might have been, you are not just looking at a saved expense or a spared cleaning ritual. You are observing a rejected invitation to practice flexibility. The animal was never just an animal. It was a persistent, low-stakes training mechanism for tolerating the uncontrolled nature of reality. It was a biological anchor that forced you to remain present in the messy, physical world. By removing it, you have not solved the problem of entropy. You have simply exiled it to the other side of your door. You have won the argument against the chaos. The boundaries hold. The hygiene is impeccable. Yet, in the quietest part of the night, the safety feels less like a sanctuary and more like a waiting room. The door is locked. The room is clean. The battery is full. And you are sitting there, perfectly regulated, waiting for a signal from a world you have already disconnected.